We got primetime bright lights tonight in Hollywood, and where everybody's got a dream. It's a dream for Sam Darnold to go back where he played his college ball. Can he extract a measure of revenge in a place that he's very familiar with? And Matthew Stafford gets his favorite target back. Will that make a difference in the game between the Vikings and the Rams? We have got it on lockdown for you on the Pregame PowerUp, and it starts, well, now. SoFi, the place to be tonight. The Rams coming off a win last week. Vikings coming off a loss. They'll meet tonight right here in Inglewood. Kevin O'Connell returns to SoFi Stadium for the first time since Super Bowl 56, where he was part of the staff that took down the Bengals 23-20. And with that, we are off and running on week 8 already of the regular season. Welcome into the Pregame Power, presented by Campbell's Chunky. It is soup that eats like a meal. Trey Wingo, Claudia Bellafato is here with us. Mike Golick Jr. will join us from SoFi. We'll also talk to Mike Pritchard at the trading floor at the DraftKings spot in Las Vegas. And we will have a million other things for you. Claudia, the line in this game sort of going all over the place as we look at it.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a lot of news people were waiting on, some rumors that came up. But, of course, the injuries were the topic of conversation. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, both who will play. To what extent for Nacua, we don't know. And regardless of the Vikings coming off their first win, they opened as the 3-point favorite. It got up to 3.5. Now, keep in mind, 3 is that key number, so significant when it gets that hook, that half point. So got up to 3.5, bounced around, now down to 2.5, too. As far as the total goes, Trey, 46 last week. Bet up to 48, as high as 48.5, now settling down to around 47.5. But like I said, a lot of news swirling around. Market doesn't know exactly what to do with it, and now we're getting this news about Cooper Kupp possibly on the trade block.
Yeah, listen, the Rams could use him because right now we're looking at a Rams team that started 2-4. That's the worst 6-game start as long as Sean McVay has been their head coach. But as Bellafato alluded to, the cavalry is on the way. Cooper Kupp expected to make his return tonight, recovering from that sprained ankle he suffered back in week 2. But his return doesn't come without drama, because as Claudia was alluding to, multiple reports have stated the star wide receiver is on the trading block, with LA seeking a second-round pick for his services. We'll see how the injury as well as the trade rumors impact his availability tonight. But let's just say Matthew Stafford is glad to have him back. Looking at his props for tonight's game, the book doesn't think Kupp will be too limited. 6.5 receptions, right around his average, 69.5 receiving yards, a little lower, and getting some good value of an anytime touchdown at plus 140. But overall, it looks like all systems go for Cooper Kupp. Here's what the man himself had to say about how he's feeling heading into tonight's showdown.
I mean, I don't like coming off the field. I would love to be able to, play as much as I possibly could, and that's gonna be my mindset. I mean, that's when I feel like I'm healthy. I feel like that's when I'm healthy, I can do it, and so that's been my mindset. But that's up to the coaches ultimately to decide, and the training staff how they want to activate us. How they want to use us, and we've got some guys that have played some really good football the last couple of weeks too, and just figuring out what the best grouping is, what the best group of guys, how you want to get those guys on off the field. Whatever it takes to get the LA Rams a W is ultimately what we want to do.
Each player's different, right? Whether however old they are, how many years they played in the league, how their body's reacting to the time off and the rehab and all that kind of stuff. So again, you just listen to the player, you trust the player, especially a veteran like Coop. See where his body's at, and he's going to be truthful.
Before we move on, as we look at these other injuries, can we just take a moment to acknowledge the beard for Cooper?
What do you mean the beard? The muscles.
that was a neck sweater. It looks like he's an Amish reality
he can do
TV
whatever
star.
He wants
That was impressive as hell. Cooper Kupp, tip of the cap. I'd like to know how that works. That's fantastic. A couple of other dynamic playmakers could see some action tonight. Again, Puka Nacua expected to play. We don't know what his role is going to be. But the Vikings, bad news for them. They've already ruled out T.J. Hopkins with that knee. They think he will return next week. Claudia, I send it over to you.
Yeah, I don't know why the beard is the first thing. You didn't see him? He looks absolutely yoked, and LaFleur's worried about his
The beard was the
body.
first thing.
I think he'll be fine.
The beard was the first thing.
Anyways, let's talk about the Vikings, shall we? They suffered their first loss of the season at the hands of their division rival last week, falling 31-29 to the Lions. Sam Darnold led the NFL in passing touchdowns through 4 weeks with 11, but just one passing touchdown in the 2 games since. The last time Minnesota started 5-0 and lost their 6th game was 2016. In that season, they finished 8-8 and ended up missing the playoffs. In fact, it's happened twice to them since 2000, Trey. Currently, plus 425 to miss the playoffs this season, if you care to take it. Either way, 5-1 is not where most people expected this team to be after 7 weeks, but they don't really care about that.
My job is just continuing to press forward and trying to elevate kind of our standards and really I think in the eyes of a lot of folks maybe looking at the first 6 games maybe we're in a different spot than people thought we would be in, but that has really never meant anything to me or our team.
I mean, just like we said at the beginning of the season, we're going to have to wake some people up. We're going to have to be that team that no one is counting on to be good and expecting to come out and be the team that we are today. So we knew that we were going to, get that, attention. And then, of course, looking, forward from the start of the season and seeing that primetime game, that first Thursday night, is always something to be excited about.
Before the season, the Vikings were getting no love from odds makers. Well, how the turntables. All right, you're gonna have to drink a lot of juice right now. Minus 650. We're getting great plus money for them just to make the playoffs, and of course that's gonna reflect in the division and the conference odds as well, and certainly when it comes to Super Bowl, Trey.
Yeah, I can't imagine that they'll go 5-0 to start the season and miss the playoffs again. But again, stranger things have happened. So for more on this game, let's head out to SoFi with the man who clearly has the second most impressive beard on the pregame power-up this week. None other than my good friend, Mike Golick Jr. Gojo, we talk so much about the injuries to Puka and Cooper Kupp, but as you well know, having played center at Notre Dame, you never notice an offensive line until you don't have one. And the Rams' offensive line was decimated by injuries. How much do you think that wall up front and those 3 missing players was a huge part of their struggle out of the gate?
There's no doubt, Trey, it was massive, especially for a team that had really shifted its identity last year behind that offensive line. Sean McVay, noted as an outside zone guy, one of the architects in the Shanahan-McVay scheme, now transitioned to inside zone, duo, these thick downhill runs behind the beef slab of an offensive line that they had with Kyren Williams in the backfield, and they wanted to double down on that this year. They drafted Blake Corum as a really similar back in that backfield to try and give him a little bit of help there as they wanted to lean in on that, but the protection for Matthew Stafford, who we know is mobile but not a dual threat quarterback by any means. All of it, no doubt, a massive effect to go along with the missing wide receivers to start this season.
Well, that's why, Gojo, this whole conversation of getting rid of Cooper Kupp, trading him away from the Rams when you did go out and get the pieces around him and you're not so reliant on him, doesn't really make sense to me. Now, last year they won 7 of their last 8 games and made the playoffs after a 3-6 start, so they can certainly turn this around. Why are they even having this conversation of letting him go?
I think like any of us who, if you had a toxic ex at some point in your life that just wanted to keep their options open, that might be the case for the Rams here, where they really want to read the tea leaves. This is an organization that over the last couple of years, you're right, has done a great job reinventing themselves, and I think put themselves in position not only to have success this year, but in the long term, so long as Matthew Stafford remains healthy in the midst of that group. And so it never hurts to pick up the phone in any business deal, but I do think I was a bit surprised like you were, because if you get Cooper Kupp back healthy, if you get Puka Nacua back healthy, all of a sudden we know that this team can get hot. And going into next year, if this group gets healthy and they get some added depth along the offensive line to try and insulate themselves against these problems, this young defense is only going to get better. This front 7, led by Jared Verse, who in his rookie season has been sensational so far, gives them a chance to offset that loss of Aaron Donald in the aggregate. So I'm with you, very surprised by the way this played out.
Yeah, especially when you look at what they did last season when they stumbled out of the gate and then had a great surge to make into the postseason. We'll get into that a little bit later. Stafford, of course, the first pick of the 2009 draft, so you start wondering how much longer he can be around. But then you look at the Minnesota Vikings, Gojo, and we're talking about the third overall pick, of the 2018 draft in Sam Darnold. The Vikings have really been a pleasant surprise to a lot of people. Not a lot of expectations, as we said earlier in the show. What did we get wrong about the Vikings before they put this season together to start 5-0?
Yeah, Trey, I think it was two things. I think the first one is understandable, is we had some healthy skepticism around Sam Darnold, given what we had known about him going back to his days with the Jets, but then the attempted reclamation in a place like Carolina, going and being the backup for a year in San Francisco. And so coming here, we just weren't sure. It's kind of like Geno Smith when he went to Seattle. We just hadn't seen him play ball like this in a while, but insulated by this offense, making plays in his own right and in a healthier environment, he's been better. And I think on the other side, we maybe underestimated just how dominant this defense was going to be. We knew that attacking style under Brian Flores had plenty of quality players, but to go out and really dictate the terms and rattle so many quarterbacks. Think of the images of C.J. Stroud with his head in his hands on the sideline, Brock Purdy coming off the field and telling Brian Flores that scheme is sick. They had gone and not only done this, but done this at high-level competition against some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And so I think this group being the hammer to the extent they've been, we probably underestimated some on that side.
Yeah, and the Sam Darnold fan club, everybody's coming out now. I want to see those tickets who actually bet on this team before the season started, all you Sam Darnold stans. With this hot start, though, Kevin O'Connell is now the favorite to be Coach of the Year, plus 275, tied with Dan Quinn. Behind them, you have Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, Dan Campbell, who I think everybody loves going back to last season. Who would you put your money on right now, Gojo?
Well, if you listen to Gojo and Golic, I put my money on Kevin O'Connell before the season for this exact reason, because if things went this way and went well, you knew he was going to get the credit. He's already someone who's, Claudia Trey, so respected around the league as a play caller, cut from the cloth like the folks out here in Los Angeles, having spent time here, and had the defense to boot. There were the other things around him, sort of like we talked about that Cleveland Browns roster last year, where, hey, if you just get the right quarterback play, you can be a playoff team, potentially a Super Bowl team. I think a lot of people looked at the bones of the Vikings team this year and said, hey, if you can coach Sam Darnold to a point where this team can be viable, Kevin O'Connell's sitting in a good situation to get a lot of that credit, and here we are.
Yeah, and people forget, Sam Darnold and Joe Burrow are basically the same age. I mean, he's still a young player. He was so young when he came out in the 2018 draft. All right, you said you had your money on Gojo and Golic on Kevin O'Connell before the season started. Who do you have your money on tonight? Who do you like?
I like the Vikings tonight, and I think we spent so much time talking about their defense against the Rams offense, which is going to be a fun matchup now that both these receivers are back on the field. But I look at the other side, Aaron Jones off the injury report after dealing with that hammy this week, going up against a Rams rush defense that, hey, the back end might have been the focus with some of the guys, Trey White and others, they had to move on from in favor of some younger talent on the backside. But I look at the front seven of this defense that still has been giving up a lot of rushing yards this year, and I think that's where Minnesota can get right, take the air out of the football, and give Sam Darnold some of those play-action opportunities to go deep for Justin Jefferson, where this Rams defense has also struggled. So I think the Vikings get back on track and get a win tonight here at SoFi.
All right, Gojo, thanks. We'll check back to you a little bit later on this edition of Pregame Power Up. And you mentioned Kevin O'Connell coming back with the Minnesota Vikings as their head coach. Let us not forget, he was a part of a really good run with Matthew Stafford. Stafford's 1 year with Kevin O'Connell as his offensive coordinator was his best with the LA Rams. His 41 touchdown passes in 2021 were tied for the most in his career. In fact, he's only thrown for 37 since that season, and they also went on to win the Super Bowl that year in what was a really weird thing of back-to-back seasons where we had a home team hosting the Super Bowl and winning it. The Bucs won it in the COVID year, Super Bowl 55, and then 23-20, the Rams over the Bengals in Super Bowl 56. So,
and I mean, the reason we're talking about head coaches versus the MVP conversation, right? Like, Stafford doesn't have to be MVP of this team because of all those pieces they picked up. So Gojo mentioned it. If they can really fix the issues and the holes in their defense, and of course getting guys back healthy is going to be a huge part of that. Stafford doesn't have to be amazing. He doesn't have to be MVP caliber for them to make a push into the postseason. And We saw them do it not too long ago, get a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and, it helps if he's upright, which is why we always give love to the big offensive lineman. And our offensive lineman, Marshall Newhouse, will join us in just a little bit to talk about what he sees in this game and a couple of other things as well. We are just getting started on the pregame power-up. Justin Jefferson has yet to have a 100-yard receiving game this season, and he knows it could be this game. Will the Jet take off? We'll talk about it next on the pregame power-up. Pregame power-up is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
To Pregame Power Up, presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. Let's take a look at tonight's betting splits. It's a public betting alert. 85% of the moneyline bets are on the Vikings. 88% of the spread bets are on the Vikings as well. The public also likes the over, which may have something to do with the Rams getting healthier. But let's see what our anonymous sportsbook informant, Captain Book, has to say about the action that DraftKings is taking.
It's Thursday night, baby, and that means it's time for the captain to collect. If the Vikings don't get back in the win column tonight, Minnesota and the public may be rethinking their love for purple. Most of the action for this matchup has been hot and heavy on Skinny Mini. VIP and casuals are laying the wood and drinking the moneyline juice. But why does the book move the Vikings off 3? It's the circle of life in the NFL. Go to war with the Lion Kings and rarely recoup quick. LA opened the season going toe-to-toe with Detroit, but after an opening night L in Motown, the Rams couldn't respond, as the Cardinals curb-stomped Matt Stafford's team in Week 2. The Vikings need a huge win here to stay in the thick of an NFC North slugfest, and on the heels of another Lions mauling, sharp bettors love LA, and are cruising with the captain. Welcome to Hollywood. What's your dream?
Those that don't know, that was a reference to the movie Pretty Woman from Captain Book.
Oh,
that
I
came out
didn't
in
catch that.
1990. So
I've seen
Captain
it.
Book showing his vintage era film knowledge. Nicely done.
He gives me new phrases every day. Skinny Mini. So if you want to fade Skinny Mini and you want to follow the Sharps on LA, how about this? Short King is Sean McVay. career on a short rest. He's 13-6 overall ATS, 6 straight covers at night. And as for the Vikings, skinny mini, undefeated teams who come off their first loss and then play on Thursday Night Football are just 6-10 straight up since 1990, Trey.
Well, Claudia, I think we make the perfect segue now from skinny mini to big boy observations. And for more on this game tonight, let's bring in our guy. We're taking it to the house. Marshall Newhouse played 11 seasons in the NFL after his collegiate days at TCU. Marshall, let's start with Sam Darnold. We talked about them being a little bit of a surprise so far. You know, Sam was in a terrible situation in New York. Everyone always is in a terrible situation in New York. We're talking about the Jets specifically. And he sort of found his way. What has been the thing that's impressed you most about how he's managed this start for Minnesota?
Oh, man, he's doing so many things well, but it's also the situation around him. And what we talk about all the time is situation matters. And Sam Darnold is taking care of the football. He's got 12 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. But Coach Kevin O'Connell was calling a really great game. And then ultimately, I'll go back to this all the time. The O-line is playing incredibly well.
Hell yeah,
Christian Derrick saw at left tackle. Brian O'Neill at right tackle. One of the top tackle duos in the league. Are giving him time to then make his progressions and throw these balls downfield. It helps also that Justin Jefferson is down there catching those footballs. So all these things go into Sam Darnold having a really stellar season for himself.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. I preach this all the time because at its core, football is about one thing, one wall of men trying to dominate another wall of men. And that's where the O-line comes in big. And like I said, you never talk about it until you realize you don't have one. And Minnesota, be able to dominate up front because why fly when you can drive? Sam may not be a big part of this game plan. We're talking about a Rams team that is 30th in the league when it comes to stopping the run. Opponents averaging 151.7 yards per game. Why would you even think about it when you can, control the football by moving Darrisaw and all those big hogs up front and just letting Aaron Jones eat?
Well, on paper, that makes the most sense. Yeah, they've got a bottom of the league run defense. They're giving them a ton of yards per game on the ground. Aaron Jones has had a really stellar season. Hopefully he's healthy at this point. But also, the Rams have been sneakily a very stingy defense. They haven't been getting blown out like the numbers would suggest. But also it comes down to the vacuum that is Aaron Donald. Yeah. There is just no way to replace the intention that he brought on defense from a run standpoint and from a passing standpoint. We always talk about as an elite pass rusher, one of the best of all time, but he got 4 hands and 4 eyes, we called it in the offensive line room, on him on every rushing down. He would take chances, he would make splash plays, but guys knew where he was at all times. And so the Rams have had a really difficult time replacing that production. Who wouldn't? But yeah, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't run, but they're playing really sneaky defense. Jared Verse is coming, a rising star at defensive end, and they're going to keep this game close, I believe, but that's definitely the weakest point on the defense. But the Vikings don't have a team that's built to just run 40 times a game. Maybe they show us tonight, but I still want to pass the ball. You still want to get Justin Jefferson the ball, but it would say on paper to run a lot tonight.
Yeah, to your point about getting Jefferson the ball, in his career, they're 3-0. The Vikings are in primetime games when he has at least one receiving touchdown. They are 1-6 in games where he doesn't have a receiving touchdown. So let's talk about the Vikings as a whole. We talked about Sam Darnold. We looked at how they might attack the Rams tonight. The Vikings may be the most balanced team in football. They're top 6 in points per game and top 6 in points given up per game. Where's the weakness in Minnesota? And it's funny to say this as we're coming off their first loss of the season, but there's no lack of honor in losing to the Detroit Lions. So is there a weakness that you see from the time you've studied the Vikings?
Well, yeah, it's on the defensive side. We've talked glowingly about Brian Flores deservedly slow all season and the pressure, the scheming he's been doing up front, but they're giving up almost the most completions in the league through the air. Now, completions don't turn into touchdowns, but they are giving up completions. And then you couple that with being a bottom of the league pass rush, which we're not used to seeing. I played in the NFC North with Jared Allen, Daniil Hunter, Brian Robinson. They always had guys who could put pressure on the quarterback. They just don't have that this year. They're lacking in production. That equates to more time for the opposing team to kind of pick you apart. Now, Matthew Stafford is a guy who can pick anyone apart, especially if he gets weapons back now, maybe Puka Nacua. And so that is, to me, the one glaring point. The reason Brian Flores is bringing all these exotic pressures is he's trying to manufacture pressure and manufacture rush, because if they just squared up and rushed 4, I don't think they're as good of a team and as good of a defense.
All right, so with all that being said, where are you leaning tonight, Marshall?
I'm taking the Rams.
Whoa!
I like the Rams. I think they had a chance to trade a lot of guys away. That was always the talk. I think they're always looking to wheel and deal because they're a forward-thinking team. But the Rams at home, I think, have a chance in this game.
All right, that would be interesting. Remember, they started poorly last year and went on a run and made the postseason. We'll see what happens. Marshall, we will take it to the house one more time later on this edition of Pregame PowerUp. We'll talk to you then. Claudia.
Marshall, you might want to wait after you listen to this first and trend. If you like the Rams, a possible live bet opportunity to get some better value, because the Vikings, one thing they do well is start fast. They have outscored opponents 58-3 in the first quarter. They have scored first in every single game this season, and that Rams squad that you're on, Marshall, have allowed the first touchdown to opponents in 13 straight games. So maybe if you want another play, Minnesota to score the first touchdown at -135. Oh, and I know Cooper Kupp is back and Puka Nacua for the Rams, but the Vikings have this guy, Justin Jefferson. You may have heard of him. Yeah, off to a great start this season again. He leads the Vikings with 33 catches, 531 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Top 5 in the league in yards and touchdowns as well. However, one thing he hasn't done is eclipse 100 receiving yards in a game yet, something he did 5 times last season despite only playing in 10 games. And he's well aware of that fact.
It's right there. It's right there. I'm definitely sick of having these 80, 90 yard, games. I definitely got to get over that hump of 100 yards. That's definitely my plan. But if you see it on tape, the explosive plays are all over the field. Not just me, just all over the field. And we just got to be dialed in, all 11 to execute those plays and give Sam a little bit more time, So it's going to be one of these games that we're going to show the world that, what we're really capable of. And hopefully it's Thursday night.
I mean, you've kind of showed us what you're capable of, but we will take it again, and it's a good spot for you, Justin Jefferson, tonight as we look at our next-gen matchup to hit that 100-yard mark. The Rams have been susceptible to the big play. He just mentioned those explosive plays. They're allowing over 14 yards a target on vertical routes, something that Justin Jefferson loves to run, with 8 catches, 266 yards, and 3 touchdowns on such routes. This season, Jefferson tonight plus 150 to go over 100 yards, Trey.
Which again would be the first time this season. And for more on that potential and everything else going on in this game, let's welcome in a guy who has had 100 receiving yard games in his career. Mike Pritchard spent 9 seasons in the NFL. He joins us from the DraftKings trading floor right now. Listen, we've talked, Mike, about Sam Darnold and how different he has looked this year. I don't think it's this simplistic, but how much does it help that every once in a while, like Kirk Cousins before him, he can say, F it, I know 18's out there somewhere.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think he does say that at times, too, to be honest with you, Trey. No, he's entirely comfortable. I mean, you're talking about Sam Darnold and a guy who's been a journeyman quarterback in his brief career so far. But yet now he's in a place where he feels comfortable, not only with the offense, not only with the play caller and O'Connell, but with the players around him, too. And Justin Jefferson provides that comfort because he's dependable, right? Man-to-man coverage, I'm going to JJ. If it's zone coverage, I need a big play, I'm going to JJ. We need to win the game, I'm going to JJ. I mean, I think as a quarterback, when you're that comfortable with the guy and that guy is that dependable for you, you're going to build that trust, certainly, but then more importantly, you're going to have that confidence on game day.
Yeah, it's pretty simple when it comes down to it. We have 2 of the best wide receivers in the NFL on the field tonight. Let's talk about Cooper Kupp being back. We all know it's a massive boost for this Rams offense, but specifically in this spot, it's great because they're facing one of the best defenses in the league in the Vikings. I want to talk about scheme, though, because right now the Vikings are blitzing over 42% of the time, the second highest rate in the NFL. But you look over to Stafford and Kupp, they have been a blitz killer. They make the defenses switch it up. When Kupp is on the field, the team blitz less. 51% pressure rate without him, drops down to 37 with him on the field. How do you expect the Vikings to change their scheme with Kupp now out there?
Claudia, on a normal week, maybe they would change things up, but this is a short week, right? But here's I guess, the analysis that I came up with that I think could make a difference in this game. They're identical on offense. They're both 11 personnel. They both run the same scheme. They might have the same play calls. They might have the same checks, right? So are the offenses going to be able to change up their checks? their audibles, or are the defenses going to be able to key off of those? I remember when I played and we played like Detroit and we ran a run and shoot, our audibles were the exact same. And so their defense knew exactly what we were going to check to, right? So I think we're going to see some of that play out in this game, unless these teams have been clever in this short week to changing that up. But, to your point, I mean, Cooper Kupp is a difference maker. We saw St. Brown get open last week against that Vikings defense. Cooper Kupp will cause problems with those checks on the back end, too, defensively. And we saw that from Minnesota. Occasionally, they'll break down. Guys are out of position. We might see Cooper Kupp running free through the defense tonight. I mean, that would be something special for Matthew Stafford tonight.
Oh, he would welcome that with open arms. There's no question about it. And speaking of open arms, the public has opened up and just absolutely loves Minnesota tonight. A large percentage of the bets in the handle on Minnesota. Not a lot of confidence in the Rams. We talked about that, the spread being 2.5. Marshall likes them. How do you think they can keep this game close?
Well, I think they got to control the line of scrimmage. They got to have ball control on offense. Certainly, that means running the ball a little bit more. But with Cooper Kupp and then Kupp, if he's going a little bit tonight, I don't know how you resist the 11 personnel identity that you formed already, right? And you got Matthew Stafford. So I think both teams, they have to be prepared for a shootout. But at the same time, on a short week, I think both teams have prepared to be dominant with running the football, maybe time, possession on offense as well. So to help out the defenses, like I mentioned before, again, identical offenses right now tonight in this matchup. It really is a unique situation in my mind.
Yeah, let's talk about this total. You said a shootout, and we're talking so much about Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams. There's so much talent, which is going to be tough for this Vikings defense. We're seeing this total around 47.5. How many points are you expecting tonight, Mike?
Well, Claudia, because it's so familiar with everybody, it's like practice one-on-one, right? And you're so familiar with somebody, it's hard to bet the over. I think this game's going to go under, like I mentioned, more time possession on offense, trying to keep each other's offenses off the field. So I like the under in that regard.
All right, Mike Richard out there in Vegas, we appreciate you. We'll see you soon. Good luck with all your bets tonight. Up next, we're heading back to LA and SoFi Stadium to get the latest on Cooper Kupp trade rumors with one of the people who reported it. Gojo is joined by the Athletics' Jordan Rodriguez next.
Pregame PowerUp is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
and Claudia back with you here on Pregame PowerUp, presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup that eats like a meal. Kyren Williams found the end zone twice in Week 7. It was his 9th straight game with at least one rushing touchdown, the longest active streak in the NFL. A $100 better would be up over $8,000 rolling over anytime touchdown bets on Williams week to week. Hindsight is 2020. Here's how it ranks historically. It's the 4th longest streak since 2000. LaDainian Tomlinson had 18 straight games with a rushing touchdown from 2004 to 2005. You see Jonathan Taylor up there with 11. Williams tonight is minus 215. You gotta drink that juice to score an anytime touchdown. For more on how people are betting this one tonight, here's DKN social media correspondent Megan Townsley.
Rams, Vikings, on Thursday Night Football, and the return of Cooper Kupp. I mean, I've already seen the good bets that are going on in the DraftKings Sportsbook betting groups, but I don't want to keep them to myself. So I decided to share with y'all, starting with the Bleacher Report betting group, where Ryan Ribeiro, he's taking probably my favorite bet of all time, and that's the fact that you can bet on interceptions. So he's rolling with Sam Darnold over a half interception thrown, and I love it. I just think that's a hilarious option on the sportsbook, but also such a fun one. Okay, let's take it to the DK Network betting group, where our own Keegan Smith, he likes Aaron Jones to hit over 25 rush yards per half in this game. And what I really like about this bet is the fact that he made the effort to comment on his own post and tell us why he likes this bet. He said he loves the value in this one because of the Rams defense. And I think it's so interesting that you can see what other people are thinking when they're placing these bets if they want to make a comment, and you can even respond back to them. So if you want to do that, go ahead and open up the DraftKings Sportsbook, click on the social tab at the top, and then hit betting groups. These groups are just such a fun, social, interactive way to see what other people are betting on and get you even more excited for the game. So make sure you go check it out and see what I'm looking at right now, because I'm telling you, there's some good stuff in here.
Thank you, Megan. Let's take a look at the Hollywood story. Kyren Williams, we just talked about, was minus 215, now minus 205. Still very expensive. Lots of people still betting it, though. Justin Jefferson up there, a little bit more digestible at minus 130. Aaron Jones, you got to lay a little bit for him. Cooper Kupp, though. Cooper Kupp, we're getting plus 130. Jordan Addison, plus 170. Some very strange bets. We have a $100 bet on C.J. Ham to score 2 touchdowns, Trey.
Sure.
And for Cam Akers to score twice, which makes a lot more sense, but I would not bet either of them.
All right. Sometimes you just got to go ham. That's just the way it
Sometimes
goes.
you gotta go
Let's
ham.
just be honest about it. All right. As we continue here in the pregame power-up, Matthew Stafford has thrown 13 touchdown passes to Cooper Kupp on end zone targets since 2021. That is tied for the 3rd most of any duo over that time frame. So he's very happy to have his top target back. However, it might be short-lived. For more on these potential trade rumors swirling around wide receiver Cooper Kupp, let's go back out to SoFi Stadium and Mike Golick Jr.
Thanks, Trey. I am here with Jordan Rodriguez from The Athletic. Does a great job covering this Los Angeles Rams team. And safe to say you've had a busy last 48 hours or so. You reported that teams were reaching out to the Rams, inquiring about Cooper Kupp, who is expected to play tonight. So what can you tell us about the latest that you've heard on that front?
Yeah, it's a fluid situation, right? Teams have been calling them about Cooper for the last couple of weeks. I reported in my column from Sunday night's game, because as the Rams continue playing games and potentially losing them, the stakes get higher and higher and higher for this team. This is a team that has one foot still in the era of its Super Bowl roster, right? And that offense fully runs through Cooper Kupp, who hasn't been healthy for the last couple of years, but when he is, his impact is undeniable. And then the other foot is firmly in the era of all of the rookies that they've drafted and developed, all the second-year players that they've drafted and developed, Puka Nacua, who they drafted and are developing, eventually whom this offense will run through. So situation's extremely fluid. It's safe to say the next 2 games will really be a huge factor in deciding how this turns out.
A far cry from the bleep them picks era of Los Angeles Rams football to now.
Trash them picks.
Maybe we love those picks an awful lot. You mentioned one of those picks, Puka Nacua, who blossomed so well last year, but been unavailable this year, off IR, and also expected to play tonight with Cooper Kupp. How much can we expect to see Puka out on the field, and to what level do they expect him back?
Yeah, it's interesting. You could feel how crucial this game is, because Puka was actually kind of scheduled toward later in November, but has been feeling really good. And it's hard to say what his full workload will be, because they didn't actually have full practices this week.
Sure.
And he only just got back onto the field in his 21-day window from injured reserve this week, and there were walkthroughs because of the short game on the Thursday night. So it's hard to know even what he looks like running around out there on the field, especially running around on turf out there. I would imagine that the team would want to be careful with Puka Nacua. I would imagine Puka Nacua does not want to be careful with Puka Nacua, especially wanting to really show up for his friend and mentor, Cooper Kupp, and his quarterback, Matthew Stafford, who has been checking on Puka almost every single day through the course of this rehab that has been unlike anything Puka has experienced in the past.
It's safe to say you take a temperature of the NFC West in general, and with the Seahawks right now, the only team above 500 there, the 49ers and some struggles, has to feel like even within this building, even though there's been so many injuries, there might still be opportunity for this season to make something.
Yeah, I'll tell you, if you have Matthew Stafford maybe playing a couple clips above where he was the last 2 weeks, if you have Cooper Kupp back, if you have Puka back, if you get Steve Avila back at left guard, which they will in a couple of weeks, and you have Sean McVay, and you have a defense that's growing and growing. It's almost like, just get it all together before it's too late, right? That's kind of the sentiment that I'm feeling from the building. Can they put this all together before it's too late to have put it together, before the NFC West is out of reach? And again, coming up in a game, in a week and a half, their game at Seattle, that's going to also be a crucial one in deciding, what decisions this team makes moving forward.
We saw this Rams team and offense come together in the middle of the season last year and go on an incredible run. Nothing says it can't happen again in 2024. Jordan, thank you so much. Always appreciate your time. Trey, back to you guys.
Jordan, Gojo, thanks very much. Here's how it looks for Stafford with Kupp on and off the field. No surprise, his cup runneth over when Cooper is out there. You're welcome.
Good one.
Kupp has been on the field for 54.5% of Stafford's dropbacks since 2023. His passer rating is nearly 20 points higher with Cooper on the field. And it just is interesting because to the point that they were alluding to there, they started 3-6 last year, then went 7-1 down the stretch, made the playoffs, and were in that game with the Lions in that playoff game. So it does seem like an odd time. Now, if they get blown out tonight, maybe that changes the dynamic. But there's only one team in the NFC West with a winning record.
Yes. I was going to say, if everybody else around them was doing a lot better, then it would be a different conversation. But can we just have fun for a second? The Lions are one team that have been discussed. Imagine Cooper Kupp on that already stacked Lions roster. And it wouldn't be the first time those GMs made a deal.
And remember, Jameson Williams is just suspended for a couple of games up in Detroit. So maybe that will make these things go a little harder in those directions. That would be an interesting one. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, in other things that have gone on around the league recently, a lot of people thought that Cooper Kupp might be a potential trade situation for the Kansas City Chiefs, but they pivoted to a different wide receiver, and that deal was officially made official today. Adam Schefter had that news that it was going to be official. They got DeAndre Hopkins for a 5th-round pick that could turn into a 4th-rounder. Hopkins has caught a pass in every game of his career, second most to begin a career behind only Marvin Harrison's 190. Although he's had to hang on by a thread in half the games this year. He's played 6 games, and in 3 of them he only has 1 catch. 2 of the top 5 active career receiving yards leaders have now been traded within the last 2 weeks. And if we're doing retro, 2 of the top 5 are now on the same team, with DeAndre Hopkins joining Travis Kelce. And a lot of people think the idea of Travis Kelce lining up with DeAndre Hopkins could open things up for Travis, who has had, let's be honest, one of the slower starts to his career. So for more on this, let's go back to the house. Let's take it back to the house. Our offensive lineman has spent 11 seasons in the NFL, Marshall Newhouse. Marshall, DeAndre Hopkins at 32 isn't going to be 24, 25-year-old DeAndre Hopkins, who had some of the best hands in the NFL, where you just go up and snatch the ball out of the air. But he's going to help a Kansas City wide receiving core that has been decimated by injuries. How do you expect they plan to use him? Because they expect him to play Sunday against the Raiders.
Well, listen, from one big man to another, I listened to the man Andy Reid, and what he said today was that he'll assume the role, kind of like Rashee Rice was doing early in the season, and that they wanted for Juju Smith-Schuster. So if you recall back to that Ravens game, Rashee Rice had, I think, 8 or 9 catches just on mismatches across the middle where he got to route up a linebacker. So you put a DeAndre Hopkins on a linebacker, who's going to win that more times than not? I'll give it to him. I would also like to point out that we've talked about, even though they're undefeated, Patrick Mahomes less than stellar, numbers this year. He's had a ton of drops from guys who aren't his normal targets. What does DeAndre Hopkins do well? He catches everything. And so I think this would be a huge thing for him. I think this can elevate their offense, which has been sputtering. Their total team has been performing, but the offense has been below par.
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins in the slot is a frightening situation for safeties, your third corner, or a linebacker. No question about it.
I mean, as we talk about Patrick Mahomes, I just have to start thinking about Baker Mayfield, because Patrick Mahomes does not look like his usual self with his arm, but he's extending plays with his leg. He has those off-script throws that make him the MVP he is and everybody else around him better. Now, can Baker Mayfield do that? Because he just lost his two best weapons, Chris and Mike Evans, both out. Godwin out for the season. Mike Evans, at least, they're thinking around week 11. So how much confidence do you have in this Bucs squad to pull through this without those two guys? And is there a possibility maybe they look into this market to bring in some help at receiver?
Listen, if they don't go out and get a guy, I think they're cooked. It's unfortunate because Baker's having a really good year, but your top two pass catchers, the next guys on the list are two running backs and a tight end. They don't have much else on the roster to go and win this division and compete in the NFC. And they don't have a run game that is consistent enough to fall back on. I love Tristan Wirfs. I love parts of this offensive line, but the right side has been not great. And I just don't think they can do that consistently enough to make up for the fact that you lose Mike Evans and you lose Chris Godwin. So listen, Cooper Kupp has maybe been floated for Tampa as a trade option. There might be other guys out there potentially, but unless you make a big sweeping deal right now, I don't know where you replace that much production, and that sucks because Baker Mayfield is having an incredible season.
Yeah, Mike Evans, by the way, is going to have his first non-1,000 receiving yard season for the first time in his career. It just shows you how consistent he's been from his rookie campaign on. So we're talking about teams losing players to injury. Marshall, we have someone coming back from injury after that concussion against the Buffalo Bills in week 2. Tua Tagovailoa is going to be back under saddle for the Miami Dolphins at quarterback. A lot of his teammates are very, very excited about it. None more so than wideout Tyreek Hill.
We're back, baby. Strike up the band. We're back, baby. Start me this week, baby. Let's go.
Saying start me this week, obviously, in fantasy football. Tua is the only Miami Dolphins quarterback that Tyreek has caught a touchdown pass from. Both Jalen Waddle and Tyreek have been non-existent with all the backup quarterbacks. But, Marshall, we all know what Tua has been through, and we all want the best for Tua. When he had his press conference about coming back this week, it was a little combative. They asked him, are you going to wear a Guardian cap? And he said, no, it's just a personal choice. But he acted like a guy that didn't want to talk about the thing that everybody else wanted to talk about in the room. When you know that you have someone with Tua's injury history, especially concussion injury history, how do you feel about that as a teammate when he's back there?
Listen, when we cross the lines into the facility, we know that we're taking a certain amount of risk. We know that's baked into the whole thing. Listen, people aren't going to talk about offensive and defensive linemen who take what they call micro concussion events over and over and over again in practice and in games. They don't talk about guys who get knocked out and come back. It's because Tua's has been and looked so dramatic and so difficult to watch for the viewer that I think he's getting more questions than others, and the fact that he's not protecting himself very well. But if I'm a player, if a guy is cleared and he makes that decision and he wants to be all in, I'm all for it. Listen, we're going to ultimately, at the end of the day, reap all what we sow, especially when it comes to football. But we love the game. It's obvious that Tua loves the game, and guys couldn't be happier for him. You obviously want him to protect himself. You don't want this to end up tragically, but we take a risk. This is a gladiator-type sport. We know what we sign up for. And so to see Tua in that locker room, this offense on the football side has been inoperable. It has been terrible. Completely just bereft of anything looking like productivity. And so if you're Mike McDaniels, you're also looking, hey, get this pressure off for me, because I obviously don't look like I can call much of a game with what they've been giving me at backup quarterback. And so Tua's going to solve a lot of ills. Will he play like his old self? We have no idea, but they at least have a shot. They have enough offensive weapons to make things matter. But without him, they were just a walking L every single weekend. And if you're the other players, I'd rather the chance to win than Tua's sitting on the sideline thinking he could play.
Yep, maybe you have a better backup quarterback situation. Marshall, as always, we appreciate it, my friend. We'll see what happens going forward as Tua is back. All right, those are Marshall's musings on Week 8 in the NFL. But for mine, a.k.a. Trey's Takes, you can check out my weekly article on DraftKingsNetwork.com. I break down my favorite storylines heading into every weekend. Pregame Power Up is presented by Campbell's Chunky. soup that eats like a meal. Pregame PowerUp presented by Campbell's Chunky. It is soup that eats like a meal. It's time for the data dump, people. We are just throwing so much information at you that you can just figure it out on your own. Sean McVay, for whatever reason, is 1-5 with 5 straight losses against his former assistant as head coaches. 4 losses to Matt LaFleur of the Packers and 1 loss to Zach Taylor's Bengals.
How about this? Stafford as a dog, okay? Matthew Stafford is a bad dog. After going 3-0 straight up as a dog in the year the Rams won the Super Bowl, since then, he's gone 2-14 overall in his career. He's 30-79 straight up as a dog since 2022. Stafford is the second worst quarterback in moneyline profit, ahead of only Bryce Young. Not great company, Trey.
Who will be starting this week for the Carolina Panthers because Andy Dalton sprained his thumb in that car accident. Then there's Jordan Addison. He's suited up for 4 games this season and has gone under his reception prop in all of those games. 3 receptions in each game. His prop tonight, of course, 3.5. However, he has scored a touchdown in 4 straight road games, and he's plus 180 to score tonight, Corey.
Sounds like good value to me. And finally, here's some trends for you to consider. Road favorites like the Vikings, 16-2 against the spread since week 5. However, teams that face the Lions are 0-4 this season in their next game. Very specific stat there. Games with home dogs are also going over the total in 16 of the last 25.
You know, what's interesting about that Lions thing, that was a real thing a couple of years ago for the 49ers. Every team that played the San Francisco, that played after they played the 49ers, lost. The only team that didn't was Kansas City because they had a bye.
So what did they just wear them out?
They are physical.
Yeah.
They literally beat the crap out of you. And that's what does Dan Campbell say? We want to bite your kneecaps.
Bite your kneecaps.
Like, that's why I love the Lions. They are the living embodiment of their head coach.
They are.
And if the Vikings get by the Rams tonight, their schedule is very favorable for them to go on a pretty decent run here.
Yeah, and right now they're 12-1 to win the Super Bowl, plus 650 in the NFC, plus 185 the division. The Lions the favorite, so now is the time, people. If they get through this win, the rest is a cakewalk. They got the Colts, the Jags, the Titans, the Bears who are looking better, but they should still win that game. The Cardinals, they should win that game. The Falcons, again, Chicago, Seahawks. who on that, besides the Lions, is going to be a real threat to this team?
Well,
I would bet the Vikings now if you believe in them.
Right. You would say the Green Bay Packers, but they are. But right, they already went up to Lambeau and won that game. So this will be a home game for them. Chicago could be sneaky. It feels like Atlanta every week is like, are you good or are you not good?
I can't with Atlanta. Nope, I'm done. I don't trust their defense. They have the weapons on offense, but doesn't matter. They don't work well together.
And you being from the Boston area, 28-3 still sticks in your head from Super Bowl 51. Here's a really weird one. The Vikings have lost 9 straight road games against NFC West teams. I don't know what that means in any way, shape, or form. I just know that it exists, which I find very interesting.
It's a phrase we say in betting is that trends are not predictive. We give you a lot of trends on the show. A lot of those are predictive. Coaches that play well in certain spots on primetime games. Players, we talked about Kirk Cousins forever playing terribly in primetime. He was able to switch that narrative, but that was all we heard about. A trend like that, I don't really know if that has anything
Well, to
behind
quote
it.
Ted Lasso, that don't make no sense.
That don't make no sense.
It just doesn't make any sense. So who do you like tonight?
Man, I like the Vikings. My gut saying Vikings. If Puka Nacua is a full go, it'd probably be a different conversation. But I think the Vikings have the edge on defense to get it done.
Okay, I would love to pick the Rams, but here's why I'm going with the Vikings as well. Sam Darnold is back in L.A. where he played his college ball at USC. Little known fact, there was a time in this country where you could advertise cigarettes, and one of the more famous cigarette campaigns was the Marlboro Man, the cowboy on the posters, looking over the prairie and having that Marlboro cigarette in his hand. Marlboro Man was a big thing in advertising. Sam Darnold's grandfather was one of the Marlboro Men, and his name was Dick Hammer.
Okay.
So I am hammering Sam Darnold and the Vikings in honor of his late grandfather. This one's for Dick Hammer, one of the original Marlboro Men, and Sam Darnold. For Claudia Bellafato, for Marshall Newhouse, for Mike Golick Jr., for Mike Pritchard, and the end of our careers. Now that I mentioned Sam Darnold's grandfather. I don't know, you're the one that told me about it. No, I said it in the 2018 draft. It's not a surprise. Thanks for watching Pregame Power Up. We'll see you again on Monday night.
It's just a name.
Dick Hammer.